All right, session 2 of the morning. Morning, everybody. All right, I got a good morning. Excellent, thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and kick off this next session. We've got 3 speakers in this session that have some great stories to share. We've got Mick Rejniak. Mick is from Cornerstone On Demand. He's the Associate Director of Sales Operations and Strategy at Cornerstone. And then we also have Michael Dunn. Michael is the Director of Product Marketing here at Apttus, and he's also a former Gartner analyst, and he manages all of our analyst relationships here at Apttus. So he's actually going to share some great research from Nucleus today. And then we also have Pratik Mukhabadi, and Pratik is a principal partner at Standev, and he's going to share some pricing strategies with us this morning. And all 3 of these guys are really here to talk about keys to driving higher growth and profit, stuff we all care about in all of our organizations, right? So let's give these guys a big welcome, and Mick, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Mick Rejniak. So a little about me. I come to sales operations through a career of recruitment, talent management, or recruitment. Oh, sure. Recruitment, staffing. After about 15 years of that, left recruiting, went into a digital design agency as a sales business development leader there, and before coming to Cornerstone and coming to the operations side. A little bit about Cornerstone. I would kind of spare you the web content you can read online, but essentially leader in the talent management, human capital management space, SaaS company. Been around for about 18 years, public company, global regions in Asia, EMEA, just to give you a sense of the scale of what we were coming into with Apttus. So just after going public at Cornerstone, we decided that we really needed something to scale the pricing operation. We needed to be able to see what the discounting was looking like. We needed to see and control some of the pricing. We needed to roll out an entirely new pricing model. And so we really needed a tool to get this done, and that's where we met Apttus in 2012. But we started with Apttus as just a tool. It was CPQ only. It was siloed. It was a sales thing. We didn't really go into it. The big misstep we took is we didn't go into it looking to achieve specific outcomes. We just knew we needed to make the pricing thing better and have some control around what folks were doing with pricing. So at the time, as I said, CPQ only, a couple hundred users, 2 regions. We weren't in APJ yet, and really just working in 3 currencies. Since then, we learned a number of things, and we doubled kind of what we were doing. Many more users, added APJ, more currencies, and then we also increased our footprint of the Aptus suite. So we moved over from just CPQ into CLM. We added the workflow approvals. We just really decided to go bigger pop with this to try and address the end-to-end quote-to-cash story. What was happening in the business was that executives were looking for a lot more control, transparency, and we couldn't just do that with CPQ alone. So expanded the Aptus footprint, and things got a lot better. But we had still sort of stepped to it with this idea we just needed to have tools to make this better. We didn't really know what we were measuring when it came to cycle times or how much time it was taking to quote. We just knew it wasn't good, and we needed to make it better. So we kind of, even though it was getting better, we were kind of making the same mistake. Well, introduced this guy, Dave Vacanti, and we started to develop this OpEx team as we came to as we came to the end of the second deployment, we started to develop this OpEx operational leadership within the services org. This helped us really define exactly what we were trying to do. It helped us define what we meant by adoption. Adoption wasn't just about how many users were clicking through a quote, Adoption for us, the meaningful metrics that we were starting to look for was can we use the data that was going into the system? Could we rely on that data? Was that data clean enough to move down into downstream systems and really handle that sort of end-to-end process? These are just for illustration purposes. This is stuff that Dave built, and I promised I'd put his picture up on the screen, because he really did a lot to make us capable, allow us to be to measure the data that was going through. So it got a lot better as we started to focus on actual outcomes we were looking for, and that was feeding downstream systems. So the big takeaway, or the big impacts that Aptus has had, has been it's played a key role in profitability, which is massive. It's allowed us to scale the business, scale the transactions without adding headcount in legal and in finance. Prior to getting our end-to-end systems working, the CFO was going to increase the billings team by 3 or 4x, so we completely avoided that. And of course, the increased operational efficiency. One story, I'll leave you with this story. Towards the end of last year, it was December, we're on the calendar year, very busy time for us, as I'm sure everyone else who has a Q4 on the year is in the same situation. Our team was really two guys, one and a half guys. Whaley's here with us today, who is also on the team. And so towards the end of the year, we have a lot of intense live support for reps. We run a live WebEx line. It's on all day. We're kind of working away. They can just drop in and get help on what they're trying to get closed. So providing that support with a couple, 1.5 guys, CEO comes down, says that we're changing the entire pricing model. We're going to go from he wanted a live 1-1. We were going from a somewhat flat, basically a flat kind of pricing on the products with a more complex discounting approvals and discounting schedule on the back end, to a tiered approach, about 12 bands per product across, maybe 100 SKUs. This was so we scoped it out, thought it was going to be a really big effort. We were able to do that, have it ready by 1/1 with maintaining our level of support and getting all the end of quarter, end of year business done. We also did that, we deployed it across the globe, so we were able to get this distributed globally, all with 1.5 guys. So pretty. If anything's going to speak to the power of Aptus and the CPQ tool, I think that probably does it. So that's all I have. Michael Dunn.
Well, that's not all. It's our customer here, and actually this is part of a series we do each of these years on key kind of themes and business impacts of quote to cash. So we want to share with you is what's going on with our customers, but also we wanted to show what's being researched out there in the marketplace by third-party industry analyst firms. As was mentioned in the introduction, I'm a recovering analyst. I worked at Gartner for 10 plus years. So I guess they're working on the pretext that it takes one to know one to interpret the research. What's interesting, what would bring your attention was a firm that I've known since the 2000 timeframe, and as a Gartner analyst had great respect for, because they did a lot of focus on ROI research, where the research was done with existing implementations. And then they would work in literally the numbers of time to payback, the value, the actual cost of ownership. So when you get these type of reports that they do, which are over 600, you will get a detailed generalization of work that they've captured, figures, from customers that they do through interview as well as through ROI. Now, they produced a report, analysis on quote to cash in a real world situations. And I'll just advance the slide here. It is a report that's actually available on the Aptus Research site, analyst site. And what they did is they've seen about how quote to cash is emerging as an important area. Now, in their thesis, they have quote to cash as an area they call edge CRM applications. And by edge, they don't mean like, wow, it's far out and it's cutting edge and bleeding edge. What they really mean is it's an accompaniment to what were the traditional CRM applications of old. So the classic opportunity management, the classic call center and case management, the marketing database. And what they've done here is look at areas that comprise quote-to-cash, such as CLM, contract lifecycle management, configure price quote, order management, the analytics, and how all those come together. The big thing they see about the impact is that out there in the world, it really is wild and hairy. People are using Excel, you have all types of different tools, and it's a pretty crazy mix-up. But what they're seeing, though, is that with the new quote-to-cash systems coming into play, and of course, Aptus quote-to-cash, people are able to police that up and better position themselves for driving both increase in margin as well as increase in growth, which oftentimes is seen, a trade-off for many companies. So some of the things they did was they interviewed a number of our customers, like 5 to 6. They also had been doing ROI studies with these customers. One of them actually got an ROI award a couple of years back. And they actually have another ROI report coming out, and I can't say who it is, but they had some very interesting results there too. What they're finding is that what does have a primary attraction for Aptus, and what I think is relevant for this effort to try and drive both sales growth and revenue, is 3 factors that are interrelated. That is the fact of functional breadth, ease of implementation on cloud platforms. And if you think about it, if you've got a nice full stack application suites on the cloud with modern technologies, people are viewing that as easier to implement. Now, what are they finding in the details of this specific report? First thing they found is everyone agrees that they've been finding productivity increases by employees in general. And if you think about quote-to-cash, that touches a lot of people. So it's not just the quote with the salespeople who are very important, but it's also the people that we once called the middle office, the contract administrators, other types of admins, on straight through billing administrators, et cetera. So that kind of end-to-end broad increase in employee productivity is pretty big. But what is key is that 12 to 18% in sales productivity. One of the areas is namely just getting rid of a lot of that administrivia that salespeople do. Like, how often would you like to keep having salespeople keep entering in data repeatedly? I mean, that's probably a worse practice for managing a sales force, is ask for the same data to be re-entered into different systems. But they see across other areas where they're able to do their tasks, execute it quicker, and that turn leads to some bigger things. So they've been able to generalize off of working with our customers that generally you can expect a 69% faster time to quote. And that starts opening up a whole lot of areas in terms of responsiveness as well as in the buying experiences. So when I was at Gartner and we started seeing CPQ start taking off, especially around the 2006, 2007 timeframe, I'd say one of the key calls that would consistently have people about ready to pay for a CPQ offering alone was that someone's on there like a head of sales, a VP of sales, VP of finance, and they go, you know what? Our business competitors are getting proposals in and quotes in at least 2 business days faster than we are. And it has an impact. The report that's coming out on call center software vendor right now, who actually policed up some of their assets. They do have Aptus CPQ, and they revamped their UI and revamped their selling methodology. They're actually seeing an increase of about 23 to 25% in revenue from having that increased responsiveness. So that's another report coming out from Nucleus. I'd say definitely go to their site and check on that. Now, the other big thing about margin is, well, controlling your costs. And what they're seeing is with the end-to-end quote-to-cash offering, you can start constraining costs, especially around staffing, deferring hiring, redeploying people. I guess some people are outright just like, yeah, we fired people, which doesn't sound great. But you're looking at that as an $800,000 savings. Then there's also, I don't have on the slide here, is the training burden is much lessened. Because now you've got these modern systems, they're consistent, and they work across the organization. So at that point, what I want to share was just third-party research that's been done on Aptus customers, but they do ROI studies on a range of industries and customers. I do suggest you go see the report on the, either their site or on the Aptus site. But at this point, I want to introduce a colleague of mine who covers a pretty important area when it comes to driving margin and growth, and that's in pricing and price management. So let me introduce Pratik, our guru here from Standoff on Pricing.
All right, so thanks a lot. And what I'll attempt to do is kind of talk a little bit on the technology piece and how it all falls together. And I don't want to go into details about stand-up or what we do, but basically I'm really excited because I was an Aptus employee, now back as a partner, so I have a really personal interest in Aptus. Great place to come back to, and I've been really encouraged by the leadership. And what I want to talk about today is how you can take pricing, and that's the most strategic lever in your whole code-to-cash implementation in trying to go from cost-based pricing towards value-based pricing. So this is one of the quotes, and I think what has happened is in the era of transformation, CPQ, business transformation, has always tried to focus mostly around how you can optimize and focus on efficiency. But when you add the benefits of pricing, you can really go from what you have to achieving the KPIs that were shared a little earlier. So what I've done is I've put together some of the challenges and then a framework that might help you. And this is platform agnostic, but there are certain elements in the Aptus Code-to-Cash platform that can really help you go there. So if you look at the typical growth problems, there is a lot of competition. Procurement teams are really finding ways to squeeze margin. There are tools I know out there where people do spend analytics, and really when you are doing a B2B transaction, when your sales rep is trying to sell something, they will come up with a lot of data points that you really need to figure out what needs to happen, right? And as well as loyalty is decreasing. So if you look at a typical B2B transaction, people churn, accounts churn, and the business model will change, the go-to-market strategies will change. So what would appeal to a customer now might not appeal to them in a couple of years. So it's really important to get your segmentation done correctly. Now, on the right-hand side, what I've done is I've tried to put together a pricing framework where if you have these elements of pricing, you can really achieve a lot of value when you're implementing CPQ. And from there, you can try and go towards the KPIs that were shown. So on the right-hand side, basically, you're managing complex pricing. Pricing is always done in spreadsheets. Then you get a CPQ tool. Then you'll have price management around there. And your real focus is around I would say the left and the right-hand side. What is typically missing is the bottom piece, where you're trying to figure out what is a pricing decision and why was customer A given a certain price versus customer B. So what it really comes down to is not only customer segmentation, because people are doing customer segmentation based on different attributes like geo or location, but price segmentation. So what you should be aspiring for when you want to do some kind of value-based pricing is try to figure out and create some micro segments, and within that, how is customer A related to customer B, and what are the different buying patterns. So that will lead you to a evolution of your CPQ tool, and you will be able to also look at pricing as a very strategic lever. Another really important thing is how do you sell this vision to your decision makers. So there are a lot of KPIs and case studies wherein if you are creating the strategic roadmap of saying, okay, my company wants to get this revenue and this margin this year, strategically, it's really easy to define those. I think one of the things that I have seen people use, which is not often used, is also look at transactions. So when you're defining your KPIs and looking for visibility, try to look at how it relates to your specific transaction, and use your transactional and the tactical data as well as a strategic piece. Because anytime people are creating a framework, they're always focused on creating the strategic framework and how it aligns with the business processes, but not really focusing on the transactional data piece. So I think that both of them go hand in hand together. And then from a value-based framework around how you manage growth, I can kind of share some of the best practices. So the way it starts is you want to look at the customer's journey. So you want to look at, people call it customer 360, but I would say that you want to start maybe even when they're not a customer but a prospect, and then try to figure out what are the different ways you can segment them and try and identify certain attributes that are unique for those customers, right? And then you should also try and figure out why are they buying from you. Are you adding value to a certain business, Are they thinking of you as a tactical tool or a transactional tool? And really figure out when you're doing your pricing strategy and trying to implement within CPQ, before you try and create the tactical transactions, you have to look at how the customers are buying from you. The other interesting thing is profit, right? So you also want to look at how margins are impacted. And sometime you are in a customer acquisition strategy. So let's say you're a growing startup, you've really got funded, and you want to focus on sales. So that strategic decision has to be made in advance that, hey, I'm going to focus on growth, and profit is not really key. And then you are a mature company. Let's say you've been acquired by a private equity, and that time you're trying to focus on valuation, and valuation will be a certain multiple of your profit. At that time, you want to focus on those things. So these are levers that CPQ allows you to do, but you also really need to figure out what is important for you, and you probably want to have a balance of both, and then go from there. And then the other important thing is looking at your performance, and then how you try to forecast it. Because if you want to, it's not just forecasting your revenue, but there are elements of rep performance, customer performance. So you have created your customer segment, you've identified certain attributes that are unique to the customer. Now you really want to figure out, how do I take the behavior of certain customers and certain reps, and is it just based on pricing? Is it based on the value I'm delivering? Can I replicate that success and use that to create a model that will help you to achieve all the pricing excellence? And this is the slide. I'll spend a few points over here. This is essentially talks about the overall architecture. So a lot of you in the room are having Aptus CPQ. A lot of the folks in the room are probably looking at a CPQ solution. But what I've tried to attempt is, I've tried to unbundle the pricing analytics piece, but also I've tried to make sure that it is under one framework, because what's really happening is, if you look at the different KPIs and all the success that was shared, you really cannot achieve those, especially after you have got the efficiency gains and you want to get continuous value from your investment for CPQ. You have to look at doing pricing transformation, because without pricing transformation, what will end up happening is you will hit a plateau and you probably won't be able to reach to your maximum potential without that. So on the left-hand side, you have your traditional CRM system. Now, thanks to AIC, it doesn't matter what CRM system it is, and same thing, it will integrate to any ERP system. And the architecture is pretty agnostic in terms of a CPQ solution. But what Aptus does really well is it brings them together. So what I want to highlight is, on the top, you've seen the typical workflow where you can see the configuration, the quoting, and the approval cycle. But on the bottom, what you really need to do is, you want to generate price guidance based on certain insights. And those insights are essentially coming from different data sources. So the typical insights for you to develop that kind of technology and bring them to CPQ will be your customer data, your product data, and your transaction data. What I mean by transaction data is essentially your order history. Who is buying from whom? What are the different buying cycles? Are they seasonal? Are they buying towards quarter end? Because one of the really interesting things we saw was the reps were discounting a lot because the sales was happening a couple of days before quarter end. And the similar customer a couple of years ago, when they had a different rep, had a much higher average selling price. And then we figured out they were trying to game the system by incentivizing this rep that, hey, you're going to meet your quota, and we'll make that phone call a couple of days in advance before quarter end, so you better give me that discount. The value the company was getting was already in place, so there was no reason for the rep to give that kind of discount. So all those things you can get from your insights and the analytics piece. And then a lot of times what happens is, any large organization, that will typically come from a business intelligence tool like Tableau or Wave Analytics. And then the price management piece will typically reside in your ERP, which is like, I've created the list price. Now I want to create the market price for certain geos. So the list price will have certain formulas from the market price. But what really works well is when you are analyzing and creating the prices based on insights, and they kind of live together really quickly. So those are the two elements that are really critical for CPQ to work well, because if you are creating the P in CPQ as a price versus pricing, all you will be ending up with unintelligent pricing, right? Because there won't be any guidance, there won't be any insights, and there are kind of a lot of algorithms and a lot of things which are pretty overwhelming. So if you can automate that piece, and you're not really relying on really a few smart pricing analysts, but kind of let the price analysts get the guidance, and then they can replicate the success from different reps into the tool. That's really important. And then in the middle, I have essentially what we call price guidance, which is if I am trying to recommend a price, what I'm trying to do in case of a B2B environment, you are essentially, rather than looking at price elasticity, which is related to the volume, we are looking at win rate elasticity, which is either I'm winning or losing, right? So when you're looking at win rate elasticity, it's really critical that you look at customers' willingness to pay. The way I explain that is someone making $100,000 versus $50,000 is paying the same subscription for Netflix. But for example, Netflix changes their price. Probably the 100,000 salary guy might have a different propensity to pay, something like that. But in a B2B environment, you translate that to a value, and then that's how you essentially come up with some kind of guidance. So once you have this guidance in place, that's where you try and develop your rules engine, and you can have certain guardrails. So what I always tell them is never only give this guidance away, but have certain rules or checks and balances around what will be the typical float. And then once you're trying to create this within CPQ, you can look at the historical transactions, look at the customer's willingness to pay, and then try and come up with the win rate elasticity, and then recommend that. And obviously, from a roadmap perspective, I always recommend look at efficiency gains in your phase one. Try to automate the process, get your product SKUs and the details out there, create a nice quoting flow. And then if you want to get incremental benefits from the investment of CPQ, try to look at pricing intelligence. And the pricing intelligence cannot be developed just by looking at the transactions that are there on your CRM. Because, as I said, you need a combination of your customer, product, and transaction data to be really successful. So with that, I probably want to just talk about some of the key points to take away around how we can look at pricing strategies, and innovative companies are definitely looking at both. And CPQ and pricing are essentially two sides of the same coin. So if you're investing in CPQ, you should definitely look at investing in pricing. And Code to Cash has definitely evolved from just being a transactional and automation system to be intelligent and giving a lot of value to customers. So with that, I'll conclude, and anyone has any questions, I'll be here and happy to answer and add some perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratik.